Welcome you all for the Raaonline teaching program. I am Dr. Monica, consultant pediatrician. Today we are going to discuss about the seizure disorders in childhood. It is again a most important topic in pediatrics. Going into the session, so before going into the seizure disorders, you should know about the definitions of certain terminologies which are used in this topic. That is, first one is seizure. Seizure is basically a abnormal paroxysmal activity in the brain. It results in the motor, sensory, behavior and autonomic manifestations. So, having said about the seizure, you should know about what is meant by convulsion and what is meant by epilepsy. So, convulsions is nothing but it is more mechanical, that is uncontrollable, any uncontrollable muscle contraction is called as convulsions. So, it need not be seizures all the time. So, definitely it is the term is not interchangeable. So, convulsions is uncontrollable muscle contractions. So, coming to epilepsy, it is basically more than or equal to 2 unprovoked seizures that happening 24 hours apart. That is called as epilepsy. So, though the three terminologies seems to be like similar, but definitely there is a large difference between the three terminologies technically. So, it can't be interchanged. And regarding seizure incidents, about 5% of the children, they have seizure in the first 5 years of life. So, regarding the classification of the type of seizures, this International League Against the Epilepsy, that is ILE task force, has come up with a operational classification of the seizure type based upon the mode of onset. Mode of seizure onset, it is classified into 4 types. It is focal, generalized, unknown onset and unclassified. So, coming to each and individual type of seizures. So, basically if you see, in all the 3 major types, that is focal onset, generalized onset and unknown onset, basically all are subtyped into 2 types, that is either motor or either motor or non-motor onset. Okay. So, either motor onset or non-motor in onset. So, here see in generalized also it is motor onset, non-motor onset. In unknown onset also if you see this motor and non-motor. Okay. So, basically they are subtyped into motor and non-motor origin. So, coming up with one by one, the focal onset basically previously it is called as a partial seizure. The older terminology is partial seizures. So, partial seizures again is classified into simple partial seizure and complex partial seizure. But these are all outdated terms. Now, partial seizure is called as focal onset seizure and the simple onset is focal onset seizure, focal seizure with preserved consciousness, that is with preserved consciousness. That is focal aware seizure basically. This complex partial seizure is focal seizure with impaired consciousness. So, this is the older terminology. So, now we are coming up with focal seizure with a preserved consciousness, that is called as focal aware seizures. Okay. Focal aware seizures is simple partial and focal seizure with impaired consciousness is complex partial seizure. Okay, this is a thing and in fact this motor onset it may be a tonic, clonic, atonic, myoclonic, hyperkinetic or epileptic spasms or associated with automatisms. So, regarding tonic type means tonic means there is an increased tone of the muscles and clonic is actually two-phased. Clonic is rhythmic contractions that occurs in 2 phases, that is one is fast contraction and slow relaxation. So, these 2 components will be rhythmic, which constitutes the clonic type of seizure. Atonic, as the name implies, there will be flaccidity of the movement. Myoclonic is actually a shock-like contractions. It actually exhibits a shock-like contractions of the muscles. Shock-like contraction of the muscles. So, this is basically the definitions of each and individual type. Okay. So, Tonic is actually increased tone which lasting for several minutes. Atonic is flaccidity. Clonic is constituting fast and slow rhythmic contractions. Myoclonic is a shock-like contraction. So, if you see, these are all the motor onset type of focal onset seizures. And regarding non-motor, it may be sensory, cognitive, emotional, autonomic. This awareness descriptor only I told in the starting. This aware is simple partial and impaired is complex partial. Okay. So, similarly, in generalized onset seizures also, there will be motor and non-motor. Non-motor is basically absence type. Either it is a typical absence, atypical absence, or associated with a myoclonic component. And regarding unknown onset seizure, basically you may not be able to determine the onset, whether it is a focal or generalized from the history and clinical examination. So, that is why it is grouped under unknown onset seizures. Whereas, in unclassified seizures, basically the type of presentation will be unusual. You can't put it in any of the above category. So, those type of seizures, unusual presentation, so they are grouped as unclassified seizures. Okay. So, this is regarding the classification of the seizures. So, basically the duration, how long the seizure is present, and the state of consciousness, whether the consciousness is retained or impaired, that should be documented, because that will be useful in the diagnosing and treating the type of seizures.